There's an old Jewish story where God compares his people to a plant. We all study in places with a national flower. England has its rose, Scotland its thistle, and Wales its daffodil. But God compared the Jewish nation to a vine. And it was a careful choice. Some plants are appreciated for their beauty, others for what can be made out of their wood. But vines find their value in their fruitfulness. Sweet, juicy grapes are evidence of a gardener's care and also bring life and goodness to all who feed on them. The Jewish nation were specially chosen to be fruitful for God in his world, like a kind of vine. They were to be full of the fruit of kindness, justice, and gentleness, like him. They were to be truth tellers, embodying God's character and pointing the surrounding nations to the promised king to come. But by the days of Jesus, this vine imagery tasted bittersweet. On the one hand, the nation appreciated how special their task was. On the other hand, they were aware of their constant failure to live out their special calling. The prophet Isaiah poetically describes how God had carefully arranged everything so that his people might live fruitfully. My loved one had a vineyard on a fertile hillside. He dug it up and cleared it of stones and planted it with choicest vines. He built a watchtower in it and dug out a wine press as well. But here's what God repeatedly found. He looked for a crop of good grapes, but it yielded only bad fruit. So imagine being amongst Jesus' disciples as he makes his latest claim. I am the true vine. It's like Jesus is saying, I am the most properly Scottish thistle ever. Everyone else may have failed, not me. I am the true vine. Jesus is claiming that he is the real Israelite, the only one who truly reflects God, and that his life has the fruit to prove it. He doesn't need to be dug up, fertilized, or replanted. He bears fruit wherever you look. Even today, many who aren't Jesus followers admit that there is an undeniable beauty, a rich fruitfulness to his life. He lived justly, loved extravagantly, and spoke truthfully. Having watched him for 3 years, Jesus' friend Peter could say of him, he committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. Can you imagine someone saying that about you? No, each of us is much more like Israel than we are like Jesus. If God were to come to us looking for good grapes, we could offer only bad. Our speech, our relationships, and our attitudes continually fall short. We leave words unsaid and we fail to take the opportunity to be generous or to stand up for the needy. According to Jesus, God will indeed look for fruit in our lives. Yet without him, each of us is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up and thrown into the fire and burnt. In the original context, Jesus' disciples couldn't have heard these words as anything other than a damning verdict on God's people. And the same solemn verdict will be spoken over our fruitless lives too. Yet, according to Jesus, fruitlessness needn't be final. Jesus invites his disciples and each of us to grow, flourish, and be fruitful. How? Through being connected to him. Left by ourselves, we're unable to bring the good fruit we owe to God. Yet, like branches joined to a healthy tree, when we're joined to Jesus, his fruit becomes evident in us too. Listen to Jesus' words. If you remain in me, and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Fruitfulness is possible when 2 things happen. First, we must connect with Jesus, and then we must remain in him. We connect with Jesus as we admit our need for him. We say, even if I try my hardest, Jesus, I can't make my life fruitful. Your fruitful life shows even my best efforts to be lacking. I need you. So can I be joined to you? Will you make me fruitful? And marvelously, Jesus' answer is yes. Moments later, Jesus will explain that he will lay down his very life for his friends. Such is his love for us. Jesus was willing to face rejection so that we might be welcomed as his friends and to be made fruitful. His fruitful life in exchange for our fruitless ones. All we need is to take Jesus at his word. That word joins us to Jesus, purifies us and prunes us. Even a totally dead branch can be brought back to life and be made fruitful by Jesus. And if we're initially made fruitful through depending upon Jesus and his word, then we become more fruitful today as we remain in that state of dependence. Remaining in Jesus means depending on him as much as when we first trusted in him. So as Jesus continues to speak his life-changing words, we allow ourselves to savor them, depend on them, and obey them. And slowly, but surely, they transform us. Indeed, says Jesus, knowing him gives us a new ability to obey God's commands. Once we may have seen God's commands as repressive. Now we know the one who speaks them and how much he loves us. Apple trees produce apples and pear trees produce pears. But Jesus is producing a people who display his likeness in his world. It's not quick. A branch grafted into a tree may take seasons to become fruitful. And yet the process starts slowly, invisibly, sometimes painfully, whenever a connection is made. God remains committed to having a fruitful, joyfully obedient people. He tasks us to live and speak so that others will tangibly experience him, tasting, touching, seeing, and hearing of his goodness. It's a big calling, but here's an even bigger promise. Connected to Jesus, we will be fruitful. You may not feel like a rose or a thistle or a daffodil, but joined to Jesus, you can be connected to the true vine and bear fruit that will last forever.